Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm your presenter, Odette Campbell, and this evening we'll be reviewing what was Tropical Storm Elsa as it passed through Grenada and further upgraded into Hurricane Elsa. The sad news is that it has left 3 people dead, 1 in St. Lucia, 2 in the Dominican Republic. It's now barreling toward Florida. And as we have been doing in our programs for the past year, we look across the Caribbean region. We're no longer insular and taking things in silos. And this evening, I'm delighted to present our panelists. From St. Lucia, we have Mr. Michael Babb. He is the Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Department. We have Mr. Abdon Whyte, and he's a member of NEMO, the National Emergency Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He's actually based on one of the Grenadines Islands. We'll be joined a little later by Mr. Stetson Babb. He is the Manager of News and Current Affairs at Starcom, which is a sister station of the GBN. We were hoping to have officials of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, with us. Unfortunately, despite all the efforts, technology would not allow. The reason being, Barbados was very badly hit by Tropical Storm Elsa, which was upgraded by the time it got to Barbados to Hurricane Elsa, and 4 days later, some people still have no electricity. So as much as our SEDEMA officials would have liked to join us, unfortunately, they called a few minutes ago to say it can't happen. So we do apologize for the absence of the SEDEMA officials as promised, but nonetheless, we will ensure that we have you covered throughout the Caribbean region this evening. So first, let's lay the platform. Let's begin at home. On Friday, a very rainy day, land slippages across the country. The news team braved the weather. GBN's Kristalina John was among team members out with the ever-brave camera woman at the GBN, a woman of all seasons, Bernadette Cornell Celestine. Let's look back at one of their reports.
GBN News crew braced the inclement weather to bring you this coverage. Our first stop was in the Woodlands St. George area, where one vehicle was trapped. We spoke with the owner, who was munching on a bowl of soup he salvaged after he was hauled out by a tow truck.
I'm in Georgia place, maybe. That water just coming in. The car was full of water, right up. I get up on top here. I get my phone, put my phone in wait and I start calling. And then the guy come and try and get it out. Put on thing, I eat in and God spare my life. There's nothing to see.
Then it was on to Calvini St. George for our next stop. River Road was one of the areas severely affected. GBN caught up with some residents volunteering their services in cleaning up following the aftermath. Sylvan Chan is the disaster coordinator for St. George.
We are at the what we call the Cocoa Road, just around the Stadium Ring Road. We had some major water drainage here, and it caused some silt and gravels and stuff to come down. And here we are currently with a group of volunteers along with 2 executive members of the district committee who's assisting in the cleanup effort as we speak at this moment.
Honorable Peter David, parliamentary representative, also chimed in.
Did not cause much human damage in terms of houses and so on, but what it did was throw a lot of debris in the road, and there are some people who have businesses close to the river that suffered some loss. But all in all, we thank God that there was no human loss, there was no human injury, and I think we've come out well. Now this brings us face to face with a project that is about to start, which is the River Rehabilitation Project. That project is supposed to start anytime now, and I look forward to that. And what happened here today tells us how critical it is to get that project going.
Madam Ras, as she is affectionately called, is one such small business owner who described her experience, saying she lost a great deal, including that of her phone and shoes.
This was one of my greatest experience. Normally I will look at it grow until it reach high up, but I just stand there and I saw it, the water high in the drain there. So I called my husband immediately and I asked him if in the back so full up. He told me yes. So I had slim chance to save anything much. All the tables went. I lost some of the plants, lost some of the table, I lost a few bags of coals, I lost some plants, lost a few buckets of wine because the water went in, and it went in with a rush, and it went in and pulled out. You know, so it's how much I could grab onto and how much I could save. But by the grace of the Almighty, I'm standing. And the neighbors around are very supportive. Well, I was very supportive, especially this one across there.
Fire tenders were on hand facilitating the cleanup process, clearing the way to accommodate the traffic. Christelina John, GBN News.
And we tip our hats to Christelina John, Bernadette, Connell, Celestine, Gerard, Joseph, and all members of the GBN crew who really braved the weather on Friday to bring you various reports. Hopefully we can hop back to a couple of them as the evening progresses. So let's go over to our panelists this evening. In St. Lucia, we have Mr. Cyprian Bobb. He's a Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Division. And we have Mr. Abdon Whyte, forever ready with responses. He's a member of NEMO, the National Emergency Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Mr. Bobb, good evening. And the news was not good coming out of St. Lucia. You had one fatality. Bring us up to date, please.
Yeah, good evening. Well, this is the thing that I was at a meeting and the weather was pretty fine. No rain. We had periods of sunshine, a few light showers. And the announcement came from NEMAC indicating that the country might be a shutdown later on during the day because we're expecting this strong tropical storm. So from the meeting ended and we all head down to our various homes and just kind of sat tight, people doing their little shopping to make sure they have the necessities as normal. And what we found was the rain started falling and then the wind picked up. And that was the big issue when the wind picked up, because the storm got to St. Lucia as a hurricane. We were all expecting a tropical storm. And by that time, I have a friend in Barbados called and said, we better brace for the worst because it's really hitting us hard in Barbados. And that's what we found happening in St. Lucia. So between the hours of 12 to about 3 p.m., that's when it was really, really, really strong in St. Lucia. We had gust winds ranging from about 70 to 80 miles per hour. And that's when we experienced the roof at the Cool Breeze Leisure Inn, just opposite my home, where the roof flew and landed right in front of our home. We saw the water heater, the panels, almost flying like a piece of paper across and into the yard with the glass shattering. That was really an experience. And what we had was somebody dying at Fort Saint-Jacques, which is an agricultural community, where he was in his bed and a tree fell onto the house and onto his stomach, and then he died there.
So, Mr. Bobb, I know it must be a really difficult time for solutions. We actually have an insert from your Prime Minister speaking about that. But first, let's go to the footage here that we have. It's coming out of Sufa, and I think that's what you were referring to, is right behind your house, you said?
That's right in front of the house, yes. And as you could see, that's the Cool Breeze Jeep and car rental, and they have guest houses to the top. And you can see that vehicle is a vehicle from Cool Breeze, and you can see all the debris right in front of our gate, which flew from the top right in front of the house.
So you heard when it collapsed? You saw when it happened?
Yes, we did. It was almost like, a jet plane with the wind and this metal sound crushing, coming down. My wife thought it was our roof that was going. So when we rushed to the front door, we saw these missiles coming across at us, down straight into the room at the front. That was very, very scary, because we said if the wind continued, it would have been our roof that would be going also.
Wow. So you mentioned earlier that you were at a meeting in the morning and then you got the advisory. So 24 hours before, St. Lucians were not put like on alert?
Well, yes, we were put on alert stating that, you see, the thing is, St. Lucians have learned that mistake coming from Hurricane Thomas, that we always knew, like, we always say that St. Lucia, God was a St. Lucian, and we're always going to be spared. But this time around, after Hurricane Thomas, we were very, very, very careful. And anything, once we hear tropical storm or hurricane coming or any bad weather, we always try to be on high alert. And NEMO always sets the pace, making sure that people do their shopping, the shops are closed at the right time, and people are asked to stay in so that we would not have any situation what really happened in Thomas the last time.
And we're just grateful to God that your family was spared. Although, you mentioned that there's a Fonse Jacques, which we would hear from your Prime Minister. He referenced that. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I want us to go on to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, an island that has been under a lot of pressure for the last 2.5 months, 3 months. Abdon, Whyte. So you had La Soufrière and its eruptions, and then Elsa decided she'll flare her skirt up, as my friend in Guyana called and asked me on Friday. So did Elsa raise her skirt at you?
Yes, well, I mean, that was the last thing we wanted to happen. We're dealing with the effects of COVID, and then you had the volcanic eruption, and our country hasn't really recovered from that. Still we have roughly about over 2,000 persons in 47 shelters, and they're mainly from the northern part of the country, and that was the area that was actually the eye of the storm passed over the northern part, the villages of Ovia and Fancy. And well, I must say that we were in a state of readiness after going through that whole situation with the volcanic eruptions. As my brother from St. Lucia said, Vincentians would normally say that God is a Vinci, and the volcanic eruption, it had us thinking differently. So the Prime Minister basically, he gave the order on the day before, in which he practically shut down the entire country for the Friday. I myself was supposed to travel to St. Vincent on that day, and although there were ferries on the island, they did not take anybody up. All basically restaurants, shops, everything was closed. But in terms of the effects of Elsa, we lost a few house roofs on the northern windward side of and just about 2 or 3 house roofs on the leeward side, on the northern leeward side of the island. What we were really worried about is the fact that there were a lot of debris still in the mountains from La Soufrière, and so we were really concerned about the lahars, and they would have affected a number of the villages up at the north. So a number of houses lost their roof, but luckily, but there are not actually many people in those villages anyway, because most of those villages are still pretty much inaccessible by vehicles. So persons that would go in and they will come out because the all clear has not been given. And remember too, again, St. Vincent is a very extensive country from north all the way down to the south. So in the Grenadines where I was, where I actually am, sorry, we, on the other hand, we were actually hoping to get a lot of rain. For some reason, a lot of that rain fell in Grenada, and we did not get as much rain as we thought, that we would have gotten down here in the Grenadines. We did not receive a lot of wind. It was mild, but as I said, most of the damage was done. A few poles fell, as I said again, and a few persons lost their house roofs. But other than that, a lot of debris came down from the La Soufrière, and still there's a lot of debris up there. So, moving forward, we are still bracing for whatever storm might be out there, because with a lot of rain, it is going to continue bringing down a lot of debris. There was not a lot of flooding. We did not have that problem in terms of flooding like what St. Lucia and Grenada had. So we did not receive that high quantity of rainfall. But sad to say, a few persons still lost their homes.
So Abdon, tell us a little bit about, you said Prime Minister Gonzalez, he shut the country down on Thursday, so on Friday nobody was really moving anywhere. What happened with CXC students? Because in Grenada they were told that the exams are going ahead as planned.
No, actually in St. Vincent our exams have not started as yet. We're in a special situation. Our exam should be starting at the end of this month because of the whole thing with the volcanic eruptions, and you have to remember that we had close to 20,000 persons in shelters, and most of those shelters are secondary schools. So although we would have had some classes online, I think the Ministry of Education applied to CXC and so that we can have a special exam, based on the circumstances that we were facing. So our students, they're actually going to start writing exams at the end of this month. So we haven't started it yet.
Good. I see we've been joined by our friend Stetson Babb out of Barbados. Welcome, Stetson, but we get you in a little bit. Mr. Bobb, in St. Lucia, the CXC students, they've started the exams yet? Did they write exams on Friday?
I think they did. In some of the schools, they did start the exams on Friday. As I said, the weather was really okay throughout Friday. It was just towards the afternoon, there was a little bit of a change. But again, the country went into this mode of actually shutting down early so that persons would make sure that we stay safe. And as our brother from St. Vincent said, that we are still experiencing the whole situation with COVID, and we do have the shutdown of the country, which is very important, especially with an impending storm. So that was put into consideration, and our populace did take heed of everything, and so that everybody stayed in from the time NEMO instituted that shutdown. That's what everybody did. But as I said, unfortunately, we still had that one death in the agricultural area at Fort Saint-Jacques. And we saw a lot of the damage taking place within the southern part of St. Lucia. So Vieux-Fort, Labrie, Soufrière, and we had a bit of the northern part where a school collapsed, the whole roof went. We had some of the roofs that flew within different parts of the island in Dennery, which is on the eastern side. But the wind, we didn't have a lot of rain, but the wind was severe. The gusts were between 70 and 80 miles per hour. So that was the real issue. Not a lot of flooding on the western side, but the wind was severe.
And what we can do at this time is to listen to the comments of St. Lucia's Prime Minister after the all clear had been given. He said he visited some of the affected areas. St. Lucia's Prime Minister. So let's listen. Let's go back to that at this time.
I also toured the CDC buildings where some of the roofs were lost and persons' homes were damaged there. And we also had the opportunity with the Sarah flood to go and meet some of the homeless persons that are being fed and housed at the Castries City Council. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be having a meeting with my ministers and all the relevant ministries and institutions to get an update on the damage that occurred during the storm and a plan to get things repaired as quickly as possible. We have been advised that there is another storm that's brewing. We still cannot confirm whether it's going to come to St. Lucia, but we must prepare ourselves for that eventuality. So we'll be moving very quickly to get the country cleaned. Sadly, I do have to report that there has been one fatality. A gentleman in Fort Saint-Jacques perished in his home. This is not the first time that this has happened at Fort Saint-Jacques, and so my sympathies go out to his family, and also I want to say my support to the community, and hopefully they're not overly concerned about their own safety, but I know that the district rep will be moving very quickly with the Soufrière Development Foundation and the council to make sure that he's there to give all of you the assurances you need. Again, I want to thank all St. Lucians for adhering to the storm warnings staying at home, and to give you the assurance that your government is out here working, and we intend to get the country clean and safe as quickly as possible. Again, God bless all of you, and God bless St. Lucia.
And while we look at the comments from St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Shashney, here in Grenada, the National Disaster Management Agency was also on top of things. And on Friday evening, GBN's Trelona George, she spoke with NADMA's Communications Officer, Ms. Oslin Crosby. So let's cross to that while we're in the spirit of those comments.
Agency Public Relations Officer, Ms. Oslin Crosby. Good evening and welcome, Ms. Crosby.
Good evening and thank you so much for having me.
What can you share with us in terms of damage, be it infrastructure and agriculture, based on information received from throughout the state of Grenada regarding the impact of Hurricane Elsa?
We have received reports, a number of reports from throughout the island of damage, mainly caused by floodwaters and the slide. It is what we expected, as the forecast from the Met Office did speak to this as the impact of the system. As it relates to putting a cost or the number, we are still conducting our assessment at NADMA to be able to collate that information before I can share the specifics with you. What I can tell you though is that we at NADMA, and we must say thank you to the public, because the message of preparedness, I think it's safe to say that it was heard. People were looking out for the weather. I think people came out of their homes prepared today to take on this day, expecting it to be wet. Some people were concerned. We have been trying to send out the information to ensure that you know what's happening. Where is Hurricane Elsa, as the system was upgraded this morning to a hurricane. Grateful for, though, is not having a direct hit. We continue to, we will sympathize and also are in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Barbados, because they cannot speak like us. It was a direct hit for them. Reports coming from Barbados show a lot of damage. So we await an official report from our regional parent body, SEDIMA, on what happened in Barbados and how we can assist. And as always, we are always willing to do so. But here in Grenada, several reports, but I cannot qualify it with numbers for you as yet, as we continue to collate that information.
Okay, thank you. That was NADMA's Public Relations Officer, Oslin Crosby. We know it's been a very busy day for you, and thank you for sharing that important information with us.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And we thank Trelona Charles for facilitating that discussion there. Ms. Crosby spoke about Barbados, and I'm happy to announce that we're now joined by Stetson. Babb has been very busy for the last couple of days and into this evening. He did say that he will join us a little late. We mentioned earlier that officials of SEDIMA were hoping to be able to join us this evening, but unfortunately power is still out in some areas in Barbados, and unfortunately they can't join. I did get a note from someone in Barbados that there's still no power in Union St. Philip. Stetson, we're glad that you have power and you can join the deliberations this evening.
Glad to be here.
So you could just give us a 1-minute intro into Barbados and how you fared, so that we'll cross the commercial break and then continue the discussions?
Indeed. So Barbados had extensive damage to homes. Indeed, roughly about 2,000 homes were damaged. Most of those, maybe 800 or 900 of those, probably more now actually. About at least 2,000 homes were damaged, and close to 100 of those were destroyed. There were no injuries and certainly no deaths, but there was extensive damage across the country. At one stage, every single household in Barbados virtually had lost electricity. Up until today, the Barbados Light and Power Company reported that they had restored power to 80% of their customers, and there were still some customers without water as well, because ahead of the storm, the Barbados Water Authority had taken their pumping stations offline to prevent damage in the case of obviously electrical issues. And some of those are actually still damaged. So there's still some customers without water and still some people in the country without electricity. But roughly 2,000 homes damaged, and about 100 of those actually destroyed.
Thanks so much for that brief. And what we'll do at this time, we'll take a commercial break and we'll continue with the discussions reviewing Hurricane Elsa.
Good morning, Grenlec meter reader.
Morning, Mr. Meterman. I'm glad I caught you. Last month, I got a very high bill, and I don't understand why.
Last month, we were not able to access your meter, so we had to estimate the bill.
So what can I do to ensure that my meter is easily accessible?
Well, you can get your licensed electrician to move your meter outside of the gate or directly in front of the house.
Well, I'll consider that.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Customer services, bill payment, revenue collections. We are open. NOASA's Lucas Street headquarters.
Come, we are excited to serve you.
NOASA, committed to meeting customers' needs.
We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall defend our islands and our oceans. To rid our waterways of plastic and other marine litter. We shall fight in the mountains, the valleys, on the coastline. We shall never surrender until every home on every street in our cities, towns and villages in the OACS learn to reuse, reduce and recycle plastic and prevent the pollution of our beloved ocean. We shall fight marine litter together with our sports clubs, our churches, the private sector, our schools. Join the fight. We shall never surrender.
This message is brought to you by the OACS Commission with funding from the Government of Norway. Remlit, tackling ocean pollution from turf to surf.
Imagine having the home of your dreams. Imagine investing in that piece of property you can call your own. Imagine finally doing that home improvement project you've always been thinking about. It's time to stop imagining and start doing. Let the GUT Credit Union help you take the first step with fantastic rates, affordable repayments, and reduced legal fees. Make the move. Get better terms on your mortgage. Use your home equity to make those dreams a reality. Act now. There's really no place like home. GUT Credit Union. It's where you belong.
You're already ill and have no time or energy to walk every which way to access your healthcare needs. So come to Spice Isle Imaging on the Carenage for a one-spot stop for all your health service needs. See our in-house doctor and get your meds from the pharmacy right on location. Digital X-ray, MRI, CT scans, mammography, ultrasound and laboratory services are also available. So for that moment when life makes demands on you, you can make demands on us. Visit us at Spice Isle Imaging, Carenage, St. George's.
Get Ruby Gas. Get cooking. Ruby Gas, clean, safe, and reliable LPG is the perfect solution for your commercial and everyday needs. For cooking at home or barbecuing, choose Ruby Gas LPG cylinders. Available in a variety of sizes from 20 to 100 pound cylinders. Ruby Gas LPG, clean, safe, reliable. Are you cooking with Ruby Gas?
Get Ruby's, get going.
And welcome back. This evening, reviewing Hurricane Elsa, which passed through Grenada as a tropical storm and was upgraded on its way out. We have with us Mr. Michael Cyprian Bobb. He is the Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Division in St. Lucia. We have Mr. Abdon Whyte of the National Emergency Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He's based in the Grenadines itself. And Mr. Stetson Babb, he is the Manager of News and Current Affairs at our sister station, Starcom, in Barbados. One of the things that we have here, St. Vincent, St. Lucia would have had a double whammy because you're dealing with COVID and then you had this. St. Vincent apparently is a triple whammy because they had COVID followed by La Soufrière and now Tropical Storm Elsa, which was upgraded to hurricane. So Abdon, we have a notification here from UE Seismic. The volcano continues to be in a state of unrest. While volcanic activity has been on the decline and the continued presence of near-surface hotspots, daily seismic activity and substantial degassing is proof that the system is still in unrest and escalation in activity can still take place with little or no warning. So how are you dealing with it as emergency responders and planners? Don't forget to unmute your microphone, Abdon.
It's never an easy thing dealing with all of it, because remember, you said triple, but we've also been dealing with a number of cases of dengue. But in terms of the volcano, well, NEMO, we haven't given the all clear. The organization hasn't given the all clear for persons to return back to their homes, basically citing all of that. But it's a difficult thing, and all that we can do is keep persons in a state of readiness. Some new equipments, because all the equipments that was at the summit of the volcano, they were destroyed. So recently, some new equipment was put in to continue to monitor the volcano as we were doing before. So we're in a state right now where we give the nation constant updates on a daily basis, and try to ensure that persons don't actually let their guards down while we continue to monitor, the status of the volcano. But as I said, it's a difficult thing, because there are a number of other things that we have to deal with, and you have to look at the economic side of it. There are a number of persons who, because of COVID and most of the economies of the Caribbean, they saw a downturn. Those are some other things that we'll have to look at. We're looking at, and resources are scarce, and persons are just trying to get by. So St. Vincent right now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are actually going through a very, very, very difficult time right now.
One wonders how the Caribbean has been coping, dependent so heavily on tourism. Probably not St. Vincent too much. We know that you depend on the agricultural sector, and certainly may have taken a hit. In Barbados, tourism, we know, has been at a standstill. Stetson, what does Hurricane Elsa's passage do to your economy in such a critical time?
First, I want to go back to a point made earlier. You talk about the triple whammy, and indeed for Barbados as well, the impact of this hurricane comes after as well the COVID-19 pandemic that has really ground our tourism sector, the mainstay of the economy, to a halt. Then it came after the volcano in St. Vincent. Even though that was involved in St. Vincent, we suffered significant ashfall. In fact, I'm aware that I was told there were some areas in St. Vincent that were as badly affected as we were. So it was really a significant impact and a significant cost of cleanup. And then came, of course, Hurricane Elsa, and I saw comments on social media where someone said, "I'm going back to sleep when the locust comes." In other words, plague, pestilence, volcanoes, hurricanes, and what else will happen now? So we've had significant challenges over the last year or so. And in terms of Elsa's impact on tourism, negligible. First of all, there are not that many tourists on the island anyhow. We're now trying to restart and reopen the economy and to reopen the tourism sector. And that was really dependent on getting on the British green list, because the majority of our tourists come from the UK. And that only happened recently. And of course, there's a lag time before they actually start to arrive. So our hotels are mostly, I would say, significantly, I wouldn't say empty, but certainly the occupancy levels are extremely low. So there were not a lot of tourists on island to start with. And secondly, the tourism properties were not badly affected. In fact, we can say that. For the most part, there was no significant damage to, say, businesses, hotels, or even, I would say, even properly well-constructed homes to a high standard. In my particular neighborhood, for instance, you have felled trees and power lines and that type of thing, but I'm not aware that any homes were significantly impacted. There's a saying in Barbados as well, high wind knows where old house lives, right? And there's a perception that a lot of the houses, there were a significant number of houses, around 2,000 damaged, most of those losing the roofs, but it's felt that many of those houses were either very old, or poorly constructed, or other challenges. And today you had one of the top executives in the insurance sector expressing great concern. He said that Elsa, a Category 1 hurricane, he called it a borderline hurricane, could cause such extensive damage. And he felt that if there was, in fact, another top engineer as well, consultant engineer, they felt that there needs to be stricter enforcement of the building code, and if the building code was strictly enforced and all the properties were built to a high standard, that there would not have been that degree of damage in Barbados. So ourselves and most of the businesses were not significantly impacted, but a lot of people were.
So Stetson, I'll ask the producer to cue that video that we played just now. It has been noted that this is the first time in 60 years that the island has been impacted by a hurricane. Is that correct?
Well, the Prime Minister made a comment to that effect, but obviously we had Hurricane Janet in 1955. I'm well aware because that's the year I started journalism. In 1980, Hurricane Allen passed by as well and did some damage. So it's more like 40 years. And I don't know whether there are certain similarities between Hurricane Janet and Elsa in that the track they took, etc. But I do recall my first major events was Hurricane Allen in 1980. And I remember overnighting. It was overnighting in the station. Coverage on Friday night. In the same way that Hurricane Allen, I remember being as a very young reporter overnighted in the newsroom while the winds blew outside. So Hurricane Janet in 1955 cost several lives. I can't remember if there were any lives. I don't think any lives lost from Hurricane Allen. I do remember we also had a hit from Hurricane Allen in 1980.
Right, so there are lots of Grenadians who know the Barbadian landscape, so we'll roll the footage again, as in old time rolling the tape, and we'd like you to take us through, if you identify some of the areas. Some of it looks like oysters. Producer, you could talk us through the footage, Stetson, if you recognize those areas.
Well, Hurricane Elsa, the eye of Hurricane Elsa, a lot of houses are pretty similar, so it's pretty difficult unless I see a particular landmark to identify houses. But I can tell you that houses largely in the south of the country, in central areas, and maybe the east as well, because Elsa, the eye of Elsa, made pretty much almost a direct hit. I mean, past technical terms, if you want to parse it down to numbers, maybe like the eye would have passed like 10 miles to the south for the southern edge of Barbados. But really and truly, it's pretty much a direct hit across the southern section of Barbados. So there's a lot of damage, particularly in the southern section and central parishes and the east of the country. So that would be obviously Christchurch, where Oystons you mentioned, which is not very far from my house, as a matter of fact. And also obviously St. Philip, St. Michael, St. George, but also some northern parishes were affected, especially by outage of electricity and water service. But I can't necessarily, it certainly doesn't look like Oystons Town there in particular, but there was, as you can see, there was a tremendous amount of felled trees. As I was driving home the afternoon, even before the all clear was given, about in the mid-afternoon, and I was on a major roadway, and it was an obstacle course. I mean, there were trees and branches and people's fences and advertising signs all over the street. It was maybe dodging an obstacle. And as a matter of fact, if it was 10 minutes earlier, I would have to turn around and try to find a different road, because one of the emergency crews had just cleared on the major highway to my home, not close to my home, just cleared enough space that my vehicle could pass through, because a huge tree had fallen across the highway. And as we speak, a large part of the highway leading to my home is still without power. All the street lights are still out. And so it was really a jolt for a lot of our. Interestingly enough, we opened our coverage from 8 o'clock tonight, and Elsa would have started to really have its biggest impacts there from between maybe like 7 o'clock onwards for about two and a half hours. And early in the night, say like up to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, people were calling and saying, good night, hello, but we do not expect anything to happen. I do not expect anything to happen because, as you said, for many decades, we've not had a significant impact. We have brushes of severe storms and hurricanes, but we have a fortunate accident of geography, we are so far south and east, 13 degrees north, 57, right? So we are so far south and east in the island chain that for the most part, systems are not very well developed by the time they reach us, or they tend to swerve north, which is according to natural movement of storms in the earth and that type of thing. So you'll find storms will bypass us to the north and then go down through Antigua and then go on to Jamaica and then on to Florida. But for the most part, we've lived a charmed life, and even when we appear to be on set for a direct hit, it just somehow seems to swerve and go north. So many Bajans did not expect a direct hit from a hurricane, weren't prepared for it, in that if you had not had a hit by a hurricane, a major hit in 40 to 60 years, therefore you don't build, number one, with that in mind, because it doesn't really happen. That's one. And two, the fortunate thing with sometimes disasters or things like that, well, it's not fortunate, but I'm feeling about a function, say fortunate, but a function of, you get a chance to rebuild your infrastructure better. I believe that would happen in Grenada to some extent. You get a chance, you're flat, and you have to rebuild, so you rebuild better. We've not had that experience to that degree. So a lot of the people and the homes were not prepared for a direct hit from a Category 1 hurricane. And therefore you have this extensive damage, far more than people felt should occur from a Category 1 hurricane.
Let's cross to St. Lucia, where we have Mr. Cyprian Bobb. He is the Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Department. And listening to Stetson, Mr. Bobb, what are your thoughts on the whole issue of sustainable living? I know that yourself and Sustainable Grenadines, Orissa Joseph, have been preaching that message. Is it coming home to us now as a result of what we've seen with Elsa and in St. Vincent La Soufriere?
Yeah, it is of great concern. And the thing is, growing up, we never experienced hurricanes of that magnitude. And we must keep in mind the whole thrust of climate change and talking about resilience and trying to build homes that can resist this type of hurricanes. We have never experienced winds up to 80 and 90 miles per hour. And we keep seeing the intensity increasing. How do we plan in building homes that could be resilient to these strong hurricanes and winds blowing at 90 miles per hour? It's just like we just have to sit tight. And our friend in Barbados made that comment. And what we have seen, a lot of the new houses would collapse and lost their roofs as compared to a lot of the older buildings would still stand. So it is something that needs to be looked at in terms of the whole engineering and the way the roofs have been built. And it's something that really needs to be, the engineers and the builders need to look at, in a serious manner. But really, it's the whole thing with climate change, the intensity of the hurricanes that we're getting right now. And the point was made as it relates to tourism. We still have not opened our gates yet where tourism is concerned because of COVID. And we had our first cruise ship during the week. And so we were beginning to kind of nose into the whole industry. We saw quite a few, the damages were all around, a lot of trees that fell. The roads and infrastructure was partly damaged. The total assessment in terms of quantifying it in terms of dollars and cents is not all done yet. But things were not as bad as expected. We had homes, as I said, roofs flew. The roads were okay the very next day that the teams were out and clearing. But it's something we really need to look at as the hurricane season has just begun. What are the intensities of the other hurricanes coming through? Whether we're going to get a direct hit in terms of flooding. We realize that we have issues with our drains, the amount of plastics that we have all over the place. And once we have a bit of flooding or rainfall event, we see the amount of plastics out in the ocean. So it is really a dual effort by everyone trying to see that our roadways are clear, the drains are cleared, but we still have was up in the watershed. And we still have effects from Thomas and this Christmas Eve trough, that some of these rivers are still blocked. There's still silt in the area. So it is really a humongous effort in trying to clear all these areas in preparation for hurricanes.
So I want to go to Abdon to ask him about the clear-up process in St. Vincent, but let me just stick with you on that, because that's the reason we like to have these regional discussions and not just focus on what's happening at home. Because on Friday, when we had a video submission, one person was complaining, oh, it's so long we've been talking about this drain and it has not been fixed and the government hasn't been doing anything. But we realized, Mr. Bobb, listening to you, that you have similar issues in St. Lucia. You were saying that some of the rivers have not been cleared. Even after Thomas, you still have some residual issues there.
Yes, we do. And actually, we're having that discussion in terms of clearing of rivers and in terms of how that clearing is being done. And we see that a lot of this heavy equipment going into the rivers, clearing the riverbanks completely, taking off sometimes the vegetation, removing all the boulders in the river, and creating this smooth, quick path for water. Because when you have a rainfall event like Thomas, or even what we had to a lesser extent from Elsa, you have water coming from the upper slopes and cascading into the lower areas. And that's what creates some of this flooding and creating some damages where homes are concerned, because the water moves away from the main channels because it's cleared and it doesn't really have the depth, and that can create problems in terms of flooding in low-lying areas. So it is a two-edged sword in terms of the clearing of the rivers, and how it's been done is very, very important.
Abdon, tell us about your Vincentian experience. We know on the Grenadine Islands you have no rivers. You depend on your wells for water. But we've seen, and we could probably go back to the latter part of the footage from St. Vincent, where I was wondering, what is that person doing there? It looked as though it's a fast-moving river, and they were just in the middle of it. What's it like in St. Vincent in terms of clearing some of the debris? But prior to that, do you have issues with some of your river courses?
Yeah, the government had done some significant work previously in terms of river defenses and maintaining some of the rivers, but we have a lot of those, and in the town area, as more and more persons start moving into the hillsides, you kind of start having more runoff, because soon after the volcanic eruption, we had a period of heavy rain where the entire city was flooded. This did not happen with Elsa, because what happened with the volcano too is that the volcano dumped a lot of silt, and the rivers up in the north right now, bridges, and there are a number of bridges that got washed away. So for example, like in the area of Sandy Bay, there's some areas where motor vehicles just cannot cross. They've been doing some remedial work in terms of, with heavy equipment, just making a passage for emergency vehicles. But every time you have rain, you have this issue. And there are houses, for example, that every time rain comes, because the rivers are now blocked, they look for new channels, and sometimes a lot of these water go directly, water and silt. Because we were looking at some videos today, because yesterday and today, NEMO, along with the media, they went up to the north of the country, and you could have seen houses, for example, where they were, after the rain, they were practically almost halfway filled with debris.
So Abdon, I just ask you to look at the footage here. Is that probably a lot of silt from La Soufrière being coming down that river there?
Yeah, it's a new term that is very familiar in the vocabulary of Vincent now. Lahars, where we have all this silt mixed with the water. So we're seeing a lot of that. And NEMO, from time to time, we advise a lot that this is the problem that we're going to be having right now. There are still house roofs in the north of the country that is still covered with ash, and it is going to continue to be a problem. Right now, the rivers, most of the rivers or the streams, they are filled with silt and debris, and we have to brace, because with the passage of Elsa, we did not receive a great amount of rain, and God knows why He did not send a lot of rain. But if we had received the amount of rain similar to what we received a few weeks after the volcanic eruption, we would have been in serious problems. So with we've not even gone into the worst of the hurricane season, where the storms are actually stronger, and we I don't know how to put it, but it is not something that we're looking forward to, because right now the rivers, they are filled with silt, and the building code, as one of the I think the gentleman from Barbados, they were not strictly adhered to. So there are a number of cases where houses were practically built in the riverbed. What? Because persons saw that the river channel got smaller, and over the years they started building houses, and as sulfur erupted and dumped a lot of silt, and then the river channel became smaller and smaller and smaller. The water started running, and a lot of the houses in the northern part of the island, they were destroyed because of flooding, because the river basically took back the space that belonged to them. And so a number of houses were destroyed because they were very close to the river channel, and some of them even in the river channel. So we're going to be having this problem for years to come, because I don't know when. We do not have the resources to actually do a lot of this work, and a lot of the problem is even further up, and there's a lot of debris up there still waiting to come down. So the more we clean, the more debris keeps coming.
All right, so Stetson, you have 30 seconds to relate to us. We have a river road in Grenada which fits the description that that Abdon just outlined. Did you have problems on River Road on Friday?
Not a lot. Interestingly, as he pointed out, Elsa did not bring a lot of rain. Interestingly enough, though, usually in hurricanes, a lot of the damage is done not by wind but by water, and flooding, etc. In this case, Elsa did not bring some rain, but not tremendous amount. And the other thing is that Elsa moved extremely quickly. And had Elsa sat on Barbados or any of the other islands in the West, the hurricane sat on the Bahamas for a day or maybe 2 days, it would be, the devastation would have been much more severe. The Elsa was a category 1, which some consider a marginal hurricane. Winds gusted up to 90 miles per hour, but the point is it moved very quickly, did not produce an overwhelming amount of rain, and that quick movement of Elsa would have prevented even more severe damage. And also on River Road, apart from, well, I don't know, maybe some trees or I don't know, maybe 4 lines or something. No, we didn't have any significant impact in the building that we were in.
All right. Thank you so much for that. This is Beyond the Headlines. Tonight we are reviewing Hurricane Elsa. Our panelists this evening join us out of Barbados, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We take a commercial break. On the other side of the break, we'll be welcoming your calls. The number you can call, 440-1252. You may have a question for members of the panel this evening, and we'll continue right after this message.
It's the big one. on Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just one little ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money bag symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch in stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Draw number 3232 for today, Monday, July 5th, 2021. I am Anisha Charles. With me this evening is Ms. Makiba Bean from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that the insurance conducts in an accountable manner, and the game balls with industry standards and no way stamped with. This time, insured tickets at hand because we're about to play for a jackpot of $86,000. But first, your free ticket letter. Good luck. This evening's free ticket letter is check your tickets. Your free ticket letter for this evening is M as in money. Let's proceed for 5 winning numbers. Good luck. First number this evening is check your tickets. First number is 25. Second number is 18. Third number is 28, followed by 29. Different file number is 11. Let's recap those numbers. Check your tickets. First number up is 25. The second, 18. Third, 28. Followed by 29. Fifth and final is 11. So that's 25, 25, 18, 18, 28, 28, 29, 29, and 11. Your free ticket letter for this evening is M as in money. Congratulations to all the winners of this evening's Lotto Draw. Lotto, play and win a lot. Already play all the games of the National Lotteries Authority supports sports, culture, and the nation building. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
By now, you should know that the early bird catches the worm. So, what are you waiting for? Put wings to your feet and head to your nearest scratch seller. For every quick sevens scratch ticket you buy at $2, the NLA gives you 7 chances at winning as much as $7,000. Scratch the entire play area for your 7 chances at revealing as much sevens and win the corresponding prizes. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play.
Good morning, Grand Lake Meter Reader.
Morning, Mr. Meterman. I'm glad I caught you. Last month, I got a very high bill, and I don't understand why.
Last month, we were not able to access your meter, so we had to estimate the bill.
So what can I do to ensure that my meter is easily accessible?
Well, you can get your licensed electrician to move your meter outside of the gate or directly in front of the house.
Well, I'll consider that.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening we're reviewing the impact of Tropical Storm then Hurricane Elsa. And this evening we would entertain your calls. The number you can call, 440-1252. You may want to reflect on your experience over the last weekend. And listening to our panelists, there are some issues you think may present commonalities across the region. You may have suggestions for our National Disaster Management Agency. We will entertain your comments this evening, 440-1252. To remind you that out of Barbados, we have the Manager of News and Current Affairs at Starcom, our sister station. We have Mr. Stetson Babb. From National Emergency Management Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have Mr. Abdon Whyte, and we have the Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Division in St. Lucia. We have Mr. Michael Cyprian Bobb. Jamaica was also impacted, and the hurricane was headed toward Cuba as well, and it's now apparently barreling towards Florida, albeit in a weakened state. So let's look at some of the footage that came out of Jamaica. As was witnessed in several see flooding there, one vehicle forced into reverse gear. In Grenada, we had our vendors who were impacted. We heard from Madame Ras, and in Jamaica as well, we saw the inundation there of the stores. And a bridge being impacted, it's up there. And we had 2 cars being swept away in Grenada. In Jamaica, we witnessed probably a similar incident, but not as submerged as the vehicle in Grenada, although it looks a little similar. Some of the hillsides in Jamaica we see there impacted as well. We listened to the video, to the voice on that, and some people were saying that several roads were rendered impassable as a result of Hurricane Elsa. We heard out of St. Vincent and St. Lucia that some of the rivers were very swollen, and here we see the similar situation in Jamaica as well. We can't tell the difference between what is the road and what is the riverbed. And this just reminds us of the St. John's River, which runs through River Road in Grenada as well, as we look on there. Another swollen riverbed, we may think, although Abdon pointed out that what sometimes you think is river, you can't distinguish between what is river and what is not. A lot of people locked in, can't get out of their homes. Some of the embankments, they were eroded. Land slippage, as was common in Grenada on Friday. And I wonder if that's Michael Alexis trying to speed through. I guess some of the people were trying to get out as soon as possible. So there we have it. Probably on Friday we thought that, we got touched and we were in a bad situation, but looking what happened to the various islands, we realized that it was universal. So let's go back to Mr. Bobb in St. Lucia. In terms of planning and looking ahead, what do you think are some of the takeaways or some of the lessons learned out of what we experienced over the last weekend?
Yeah, well, it's a very challenging question. Lessons learned, we need to try to be prepared. And how do you prepare for a natural phenomena like a hurricane with gale force winds over 50 and 75 miles per hour? We have to always make sure that, most importantly, that persons stay safe, stay in until you get the all clear. Make sure that your waterways and rivers are clear as best as possible. And to board up people living in low-lying areas, try to stay away from these areas. It's better to maybe not say lose a structure, but then we don't want to lose lives. So people have to be very careful. There is nothing we can do with a hurricane coming our way, especially if it's coming directly over the island. We just have to sit tight and do the best we can and ride it out, because there's nothing we could do. In terms of the building codes, we have to continue working on it to make sure that the roofs are secure, and to make sure that we do the best we can. That's the lessons learned, and hope that the fury of the hurricanes do not come right over us and we are spared. And as we always say sometimes in St. Lucia, that, God is a St. Lucian, and hope that he continued being a St. Lucian and to save us through this passage of storms in this year, 2021.
Grenadians up to 2004 said that God was a Grenadian as well. And I guess we're all realizing, we can't claim that as our own. We have to prepare. And let's look at some of the footage out of Grenada. The St. John's River was just kicking, as we said, as children. And so, Stetson, that's your equivalent to River Road? It's also called River Road, and it's also close to the city. Your River Road is just outside Bridgetown, and so is ours.
I'm not sure how aptly named River Road in Barbados is, because we no longer have many rivers. I understand the pre-colonial days when we had a lot more rainforest. We were much more forested. The rainfall used to be much higher, and we actually had some level of rivers. We don't really have rivers in Barbados. Perhaps seasonal, when there's heavy rain, you get more channels of water than rivers. So River Road is more named by what perhaps used to be a river, is more of a channel now. In terms of lessons from Hurricane Elsa, though, it's interesting. I think clearly God has many nationalities. So there's a saying in Barbados that God is a Barbadian as well. So what the key lesson is, we are living in a hurricane zone. Take the threat seriously, because we have not had a lot of experience being impacted by hurricanes. The agents have become complacent. So the first lesson is to wake up out of your complacency and take the threat of hurricane seriously. That's one. Two, a significant percentage of the housing stock in Barbados is of extremely poor quality. It's extremely poor, and therefore we need to rebuild better when we rebuild these houses. And we need to, we had nobody as a building code to implement and enforce the building code. And so I think those are the two key takeaways, that we have to remember we do live in a hurricane zone. And three, one of the other gentlemen referred to climate change. Because of climate change, the warming of the atmosphere, we can expect both the frequency and the intensity of storms and hurricanes to increase. And therefore, the threat increases exponentially. So the threat will increase. We have to be prepared, and we have to accept we are, I'm talking in the Barbadian context, that we are liable to the impact and to build better and enforce the building code.
Abdon, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we know there's a lot of emphasis on your marine protected areas, the Tobago Keys. So when you have so much runoff going down into the sea, what kind of concern do you have about your marine life?
The thing about it is that we don't have too much of an erosion problem in the Grenadines. Only basically at the beginning of the rainy season, and we know because there's really and truly no canopy cover. St. Vincent generally we have a lot of forests. No, we don't, because of the volcanic eruption, and most of the hillside right now is bare. And to some extent, we are happy that the rain isn't coming, full on. But most of the material that comes down, basically it stays in and around St. Vincent. They are near the beaches where there were no beaches before. To some extent, for the construction industry, there's now a lot of material, because we were actually running out of material and was about to start importing. But in terms of the Tobago Keys, the Tobago Keys is in some respect in a kind of isolated area. What we're more concerned about the Tobago Keys is sea level rise and the warming of the oceans, because for some of the islands they've been losing a bit of land, mainly because the waves are now hitting areas that they wouldn't normally hit. So that is a bigger concern to Tobago Keys, the warming of the ocean and sea level rise.
So as you're on the National Emergency Management Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and as we look back at some of the footage out of Jamaica, where we saw these vehicles racing, probably tried to get across some of the areas, and we saw in Grenada, that is in the woodlands area, we see that heavy equipment, and it's hauling apparently a van behind it, again trying probably to beat the floods. We don't know if that was possible. What kind of advice do you give to people when you're under tropical storm watch? I'm done.
Well, first and foremost is to secure your things and to be prepared. What we try, I mean, most persons now in St. Vincent, we advise persons because they know the areas that are prone to flood. So whatever you have in that area, you try and get it out. But most importantly is to secure things. We did, for some reason, for this storm, we did not have a lot of incidents with persons on the road. Most persons were basically in their house, battened down, and I think the whole attitude towards disaster preparedness changed with the whole issue with Last of Fred, because Last of Fred, to some respect, kind of caught us a bit off guard, although we had months to prepare. The order was given practically 12 hours before the sulfur erupted, so there was still a number of persons caught in the area. So now Vincentians are a bit more, open, and I think they're listening more to the advice of NEMO. But basically, persons now have changed their attitude, and they start securing and their stuff way in advance.
As we talk about preparedness and advance notification, in Barbados, we understand that there was some kind of tete-a-tete between the Met Services in Trinidad and Barbados as to exactly what it was that passed through Barbados, whether it was Tropical Storm Elsa or Hurricane Elsa. We understand that there was that. Did you hear about that?
Interesting enough, I was told there was some issue that I think it seemed to be more of a major issue in Trinidad, but somehow seemed to intertwine or involve the Met Office in Barbados. And I can't call names, when an official mentioned that to me and promised me to give me some greater detail on it. So, and I only heard about the fact there was an issue, as a matter of fact, by speaking. I was on our other sister station in Trinidad during the day yesterday, and that issue came up because it was revealed that the Met Office in Trinidad has now been banned by the government from speaking directly to the media. I made a point, but that doesn't happen here, and indicated that was an issue. When I mentioned it to officials here, somebody here that mentioned that actually Barbados was somewhat intertwined in that particular issue, but I didn't go into a lot of detail. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know how to categorize Elsa, but it clearly was a Category 1 hurricane by the time it got here. Oh, by the way, I heard the St. Lucia Prime Minister made some reference to other systems to the east. My information from our Met Office today is that there are 2 tropical waves to the east, and they pose absolutely no threat to Barbados because they're too far south. And you may get some rain, and they don't seem particularly strong either. At least according to the model data then. They may get some rain more in Trinidad and the Guianas, but there's one system to the east that may start effectively sometime tomorrow, or could bring some rain or something, but not the one behind them more that would arrive maybe like Thursday. But they don't expect that to have any significant impact because they're very far south. So we just want to clear that up, this perception that there are other systems, another storm coming behind that. But apart from that, I don't know, you have to tell me, shed some light on what was the controversy. I'm not aware, certainly from the Barbados end, there was any major controversy in terms of what Elsa was or was not.
So what you heard is basically what I heard as well. Apparently there was a tete-a-tete going on. Can you clarify for us? You said that the Met Office in Trinidad has been banned from speaking directly to the media?
Well, I was speaking to just when you invited me on your program. I was invited by it was on television in Trinidad, then radio during the day yesterday in Trinidad, the discussion program. And there was some comment was made, a general comment about the fact that the Met Office, whatever issue developed, the Met Office in Trinidad was then prohibited from speaking directly to the media. They had to speak to the permanent secretary, I believe, in the ministry responsible. No, I am not in Trinidad. I was not privy to the actual details, and that was just my understanding of what the person, the journalist that was posting the program said. So I don't have any intimate knowledge of what transpired. I actually was quite surprised. I wasn't even aware there was an issue at all. Because certainly on our end, there didn't appear to be any confusion in terms of what Elsa was or was not.
Well, what I heard was that while one island was saying it was a tropical storm, the other was saying it was a hurricane, and somehow that seemed to caused some steam, not so much as La Soufrière, but some steam was emitted over that.
Well, the thing is that systems, we can't say they have a mind of their own, but essentially, something they approach as a tropical wave or the storm can very quickly develop. For instance, we had a freak storm a couple of weeks ago, that came out of nowhere. Nobody expected anything, but in the middle of the night, there was just actually, people said the worst storm weather they have ever seen in their life. The worst thunder and lightning that people have ever experienced. Next, like right through it. But people who were awake told me about it, and that came out of nowhere. So, I mean, with all the predictions and the models, and by the way, some of the model data in relation to Elsa, there was a divergence. Some models were predicting that Elsa would not develop significantly, and others were predicting that it would become a storm or hurricane. And what I was told is that the model which eventually turned out to be correct. I was told, there's one model prediction this thing was going to develop, but that model has not been very reliable recently, so we're not sure what that particular model. But we can be prepared just in case. And it turns out that model that has not been very consistent in terms of very reliable recently turned out it would appear to be the model that was correct, because you look at the various models and they can converge or they can diverge. So you're just looking at data and trying to interpret the data, but nature has its way of doing what it wants to do, regardless. And the officials can only interpret data, and one official may interpret the data in the same way there's law, right? There's law, but one judge interprets it one way, another judge, one lawyer interprets it one way, another law. So model data, a human, his task or her task is to interpret data, and one may just interpret the data differently. I don't know.
Let me just ask Mr. Bobb in St. Lucia whether you have people expressing concern about the sharing of information, because we know across the region sometimes, because of technology and people can Google things, people can go onto the NOAA site, and they're saying that, like you've had an instance in Trinidad where the media now cannot get direct conversations with the Met Office. Do you have that issue in St. Lucia where people find the information is coming too slowly from the official sources and so they rely on the internet?
I don't recall. I don't think we have such of a problem. The only stuff the brother in from Barbados said is sometimes that in terms of whether the movement from a tropical storm to a hurricane, but again, we have no control over the weather. But sometimes people criticizing the Met Office by not having the information correct, or you have a tropical wave and then it could be a storm. And we saw that happen in 2011 when we had the Christmas trough. And a trough, and what actually happened in terms of the amount of rain and lightning and thunder, people were just blown apart. So I don't think we have such of a great problem, but the whole thing is preparedness. We are in the hurricane season, and therefore we need to be at high alert. Once we have a storm or any weather conditions coming across the islands, we need to be prepared as best as possible, because as we said, we could never know exactly how strong, or if it's going to intensify. Is it going to slow down and settle over the islands and dump a lot of rain? And once we have a natural phenomenon, there's not much we can do. Just be careful, sit tight. But I don't think we have such of a problem in St. Lucia, but we need to be very, very, very careful in terms of what we do and how we do it.
Great. So we've been reviewing Hurricane Elsa, and just before we close this evening, we want to get a latest update on its position. So let's cross to that at this time.
In the West. Thank you for joining us. I'm Major Garrett in for Nora. We're going to begin tonight in Florida, where much of the state is under tropical storm and flash flood warnings and watches, with tens of millions of Americans now in the path of Elsa. Florida's governor has declared a state of emergency for 27 counties, and people who live in low-lying areas are being asked to evacuate over concerns they could be inundated by fast-moving water. Power companies are also moving crews into position tonight, fearing downed lines could leave people without electricity for days. As we come on the air, Elsa is pounding Cuba, triggering mudslides and high water. This after it plowed through the Caribbean over the weekend. The storm, which was briefly a hurricane, could regain some strength as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. But tonight, it is not expected to hit the Miami area head on. This is where officials demolished what remained of that collapsed condo building overnight, fearing the storm might blow it over. CBS's Lonnie Quinn is tracking Elsa's forecast for us tonight, but first, CBS's Maria Villarreal is going to lead off our coverage from Tampa. Maria, good evening.
Good evening, Major. Right now, officials are calling this the calm before the storm, but a county just north of here, there are evacuations underway, and a shelter will open up tomorrow morning as Elsa creeps closer to the coast.
Florida now bracing for this. Tropical storm Elsa slamming into Cuba tonight with 60-mile-per-hour winds, dumping up to 10 inches of rain in some areas.
The storm has been battering the Caribbean since Friday. At least 3 people were killed. Elsa hit Barbados as a Category 1 hurricane, uprooting trees and blowing away several homes.
Now a tropical storm, Elsa is expected to strengthen overnight, threatening residents all along the Florida coast from the Keys to Tampa. Officials say it will not impact the search and rescue mission in Surfside.
We are, at least in terms of the Surfside with this storm, Elsa, the news is pretty good, pretty positive.
Elsa is expected to bring strong winds, heavy rain, and flooding in the next 24 to 48 hours. Worried residents bought generators and filled sandbags, anticipating the worst.
You still taking it pretty seriously?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
You never know what happened. You never know what could happen. So just taking all safety precautions so you'll be ready.
The sand ran out at that location that we were at 2 times. So obviously people are taking this seriously. The wind has started to pick up just in the last few minutes. The mayor tells us they haven't had a storm hit this area in at least 100 years. A major storm, that is. The next 10 to 12 hours will be key in figuring out exactly where Hurricane Elsa, Tropical Storm Elsa, will make landfall. Major?
Maria Villarreal dealing with the wind. Thank you so much.
Thank CBS for that report. And saw the storm doing something with her hair. Just the wind doing that there. So somehow Barbados, we seem to have lost Stetson. So we'll wrap up with comments from Abdon Whyte and Mr. Michael Bobb in St. Lucia. Abdon, your closing thoughts this evening?
Well, I just want persons both in St. Vincent and across the region. The Caribbean has suffered a lot, and the more persons are prepared in terms of what is to come in terms of this hurricane season, the more prepared persons are, the less government will have to use resources that they don't already have to help with the recovery. Preparation is key, and persons need to start taking these advisories and these warnings very seriously.
Mr. Bobb, your closing thoughts this evening.
Well, thanks. It's, as we say, it's always nature. We expect hurricanes to go through the Caribbean, especially the Windward Islands, between that time, between July up to November. So we always have to be ready as best as we can, and to heed to the advisories. Be safe, and we try our best to do that. NEMO, the professionals, have the advisories. We listen to the Met Office. We live in a highly technological world. We see all the passage from the storms from the time it leaves Africa, and we know that, so we have to be prepared. And we also have to trust God. That's most important, to make sure that we have that trust in Him, and we just have to sit tight and to be careful and to adhere to the warnings from the Met Office, from NEMO, to be safe at all times.
Thank you so much. Well said. Unfortunately, we lost Stetson Babb out of Barbados. We know that they have some power issues. Connectivity has been an issue as well, but we're so grateful to God that we were able to hear from Barbados this evening through Stetson Babb. I want to say thanks so much to Mr. Abdon Whyte of the National Emergency Organization in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Michael Cyprian Bobb. He is the Chief Technical Advisor to the Sustainable Development Division in St. Lucia. And as we mentioned, Stetson from our sister station, Starcom. We were hoping, as mentioned at the start of the program, to have officials from the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, which is based in Barbados. But unfortunately, power has not returned, and CDEMA officials are among those still without power. So unfortunately, as much as they tried different options, they looked at various ways in which they could make tonight's appearance possible, but things did not line up, so we weren't able to have them. Earlier in the program, we heard from Ms. Austin Crosby, the communications officer at the National Disaster Management Agency right here in Grenada. We did also feature reports issued by Christina John for the GBN newscast covering Tropical Storm Elsa as it passed over Grenada. We salute our camera woman of all seasons, Bernadette Connell Celestine, and on behalf of the entire production crew who once again stayed the course and steered the vehicle, made tonight's program possible. I'm your presenter, Odette Campbell. To all of you, our listeners and viewers, wherever in the world you have been joining us from, we are eternally grateful to have you in our audience every Monday night. So long for now. God's willing, we'll see you again next Monday.